Hi Dee, great to see you.
Okay, nice to see you too, Simon.
We're thinking about telling people what's happening with Partnership for Missional Church. So what have you been up to?
Okay, so I'm leading the MIT team, so the Mission Innovation team, and we've been looking at our Missional Adaptive Challenge, which is our focus statement, I suppose. It sort of explains to us what, as a church community, we can be doing in support of our local community. So what we decided to do with the input from the church community itself last year was we came up with this statement that said that, you know, through God's love and vision in our lives, that we would think about how we can help the lonely and the vulnerable people in our community, really with the aspiration that we can all live fuller and happier and more joyful lives. So that's our community of people that we want to focus on, but it's all about the whole community in Portishead sort of coming closer to living more joyful lives and fuller lives.
And obviously this has all happened during lockdown, so what's that been like in terms of doing stuff?
Well, I mean, it's been very strange. We looked at the challenge again after we defined it, sort of halfway through last year, and we thought during lockdown, has that changed?
Yeah.
And actually what we found was because of lockdown, there were more people feeling lonely, in situations where they might be more vulnerable because they've had to shield or stay away from their family, or economic issues that they've had to face, educational issues. So we actually found that the community we're trying to support has actually, grown, or the need is greater. It just reinforced that it was the right area to focus on.
Great. And who have you made contact with?
So we start off by making contact with people in the community who we think are out to support similar folk to who we think have a need. So we're looking for partners in the community who are either running their own support groups or working with organisations who support the lonely and the vulnerable. And as different members of MIT, of the Mission Innovation team, we've all gone and formed our own personal relationships with different individuals.
Yeah. And have any of these developed into people that you want to get to know a bit better? Yeah,
absolutely. We've got, I think it's about 4 folks now. So we've got somebody from VANS, which is the Voluntary Action North Somerset group, and they are very involved. So they've already got voluntary and other activities going on that they can give us lots of experience, input, advice and guidance. So they're involved. We've got the Community Development Officer from the Portishead Town Council, which is absolutely brilliant. She's a really energetic individual, and again, she's got lots of advice and guidance, knows how to look at the legalities and the other responsibilities we have in doing or taking any action. And then we've got 2 other folks who have set up their own support groups for different types of lonely and vulnerable individuals, so they're coming from a more personal experience point of view.
Brilliant. And I think in PMC we call those people of peace.
Yeah, well, I think they're partners. That's what we want to get to. Is they obviously have a peaceful vocation or a peaceful endeavour or a peaceful responsibility that they're trying to build out in their community, whether or not it's a voluntary position or another type of position. But we want to partner with them. We want to not just be the church trying to set up another activity, another event, another club or whatever it is in the organisation, but we want to partner with those who are already doing that and work together with that sort of shared set of skills, that shared experience and that shared commitment. Because it's like it's like the passage, it's like the Luke 10 passage that we've been dwelling in the Word over, is that they were sent out as in twos, groups, pairs. And when you're reading that passage, it's important to think, well, it's wonderful that people were wanting to go and volunteer and spread the word of God. But as we're forming these partners with people that aren't necessarily from a church background, we're finding that those friendships and those relationships are helping us to build a greater commitment, a greater energy, and a really great emphasis behind it.
Yeah, great. This is hopefully going to be seen by the wider church community. What can the wider church community do for this process?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. We really need as much prayerful support as we can possibly get. So it's really good to have folks thinking of us, thinking what we're doing, and asking God for us to have greater insight, understanding, and the energy to continue. But most importantly, right now, what we're looking for is to tell people about what's going on and get them involved. So the next step for the Missional Adaptive Challenge is to think about, okay, what practical activities could we take? So we are toying with this idea of a wellness partnership or a directory of different organisations and support groups across Portishead who can that people can get in touch with if they have particular needs. So we'd love the wider church community to get involved in that, recommend organisations that they think we could include in this directory or partnership. Come and ask us if they can be involved. I mean, we're looking at very practical sort of setting up situations, setting up activities right now, but there will be, need to communicate about it, put people in touch with the wellness directory, help us to, do some sort of maintenance and understanding of how it will work and broaden out into the local community. So we'd love to hear from more people in the congregation who'd like to be involved.
Brilliant. So, as well as this being going on, we've also been finding out some new spiritual practices, and finding people of peace is one of them. Another one is hospitality, which again you've been both offering hospitality but also receiving hospitality. And then the one that's sort of running underneath it all is dwelling in the Word, which is where we listen to a Bible passage, listen to God, what God is saying to us through that passage. Listen to each other as we hear what's going on, and we've tried that in church. We've tried it in our smaller groups as well, and then we've also done Seeking God's Way Together, where we've been listening to where we think God is leading us next, and particularly after the pandemic, where we're going to go with that. And then we've just introduced the listening to God through. Thinking about what God's been up to in our lives and in the lives of people that we see in the last week or so, if we're doing this on a Sunday, or possibly in the last month or so. Could you say anything about what God's been up to in your life?
Well, I think the one thing I'd say is definitely forming those relationships with those partners of peace. There are people who you might sort of bump into or have a connection with because there's a need in the community and you find out about them. But when you spend more time with them and find out what motivates them, what drew them into setting up some of the support groups that we're working with, that's made a real impression on me. So one of the support groups that we're working with that folks might be aware of is Mental Health Awareness Portishead. So that's a support group for carers or people who have a connection or a caring responsibility to a young person with a mental health need. And so the lady who set that up has become a good friend, and we reach out to each other, separate times and have conversations that aren't necessarily anything to do with PMC, but are a really good way of maintaining that connection, but also learning and growing and learning from each other. So yeah, she's become really special to me. Also, just developing and having these conversations around what PMC could do and what we could do as a wider sort of community is just opened me up to all the different support that is already existing in this town. I mean, we think it's a reasonably sized town, but the number of people who do voluntary work, who are there to help each other and who have been really spurred on by the pandemic and the impact of that just doesn't fail to amaze me that every day you find out about another group, another community, another individual, and that sort of caring and loving responsibility is really evident.
That's great. And we've just started year 3 of PMC, where we're reflecting on what we've learnt about being, I suppose, more missional, following where God is leading us. And we have a passage for year 3, which is Acts 6. And the bit which struck me as we read it the first couple of times was that God, or the disciples, chose people to help them in what we would call the domestic tasks of church, perhaps the making coffee, the service. But they chose people who were full of the Spirit and of wisdom. And I guess that's a really important thing for me, is that everything that people do for God, for the church, really matters. It's not just the big things that matter to God, it's in the small things. And if we're serving each other, then we need to see that as our spiritual work as well.
Well, absolutely. I think everybody's got a unique gift. I think we're all definitely are being blessed by God with our own talents and our skills and our experiences, and what we feel most comfortable and most natural in doing. We generally, that's where our love and our joy is, and people get some value and benefit from that. So no matter what people feel they can demonstrate God's love and power in their life, they should feel comfortable in doing that, because we need to do that. The PMC process and having that group, that team, having people from outside the church now involved, we now feel as if we are a bigger team, an augmented team, with all different skills, and that's what we want to keep working on is knowing each other better so that we can be of better service to the rest of the community.
Fantastic. What a good place to finish. Thanks, Dee.
That's all right. Thanks.